The New York State Department of Transportation presents the DOT POD.
And welcome into the DOT POD. I'm Josh Heller.
And I'm Anya Cardos.
And we are delighted to have you joining us.
Yeah, today, Josh, we've got a truly inspiring story for you. On this episode, you will meet Ed Donovan, a DOT engineer whose passion for building roadways and bridges in Long Island and in the New York City area is as strong as ever.
With over 6 decades under his hard hat, Ed has seen it all from the formation of the Long Island Expressway to bridges that make up iconic DOT structures that we know and travel today. And Ed's going to share his incredible journey, his thoughts on the future of civil engineering, and maybe even a few secrets to staying young at heart in a field that comes with so many challenges.
So grab your hard hats and join us as we explore this incredible life of Ed Donovan, and he's still crafting the roads we travel today. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you
appreciate
for
you taking
joining
some
us.
time. So we are on location in Calverton, New York, which is down towards the end of Long Island and towards the Riverhead area for anyone who's familiar with the Long Island area. And Ed, we're really excited to get a chance to chat with you. So I guess we'll start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and I guess we'll start with how you got started with DOT. When you got started with DOT.
Well, I grew up in a city in Brooklyn. I wound up going to Manhattan College. And as a result, upon graduation, I went with the New York State Department of Transportation in 1960.
Talk about the landscape, if you don't mind, of DOT at that time. What were some of the early projects that you were working on early in your career, and kind of describe what DOT was like at that time?
Well, at that time, I started, my first contract work was on the Long Island Expressway. It was around Sunnyside Boulevard, as I recall, so it's pretty far into the west. And what we visualized ahead of us to build the Long Island Expressway from there out to Riverhead, where we are now, was just a big forest.
Wow.
That's all it was. Plenty of trees, plenty of nothing. And our job was to create a highway out of that. And generally speaking, we were on contracts about 5 to 5.5 miles long a piece. And it was broken up into segments as we continued to the east.
So at that time, it was just trees. Were there any farms, no houses really in this area? What was it like?
Well, there were some houses on the outskirts of the expressway, but generally speaking, 100% trees. Farms, mostly off to the side, but nothing we had to go through directly, as I recall it, where we went right through the middle of a farm or right through any kind of a housing development or anything like that. Most of that's the length that they picked and the alignment that they picked. We pretty much avoided anything specific like that.
What year was this?
Well, it started in 1960, and I believe I finished it up in around 1971, I believe.
That's amazing. And now, I mean, everybody knows the Long Island Expressway. I mean, it's, all these communities have been built up around this roadway.
Yes, the communities have been built around it, and the traffic has been built around it. And, of course, the traffic increased incredibly since the time that we built it.
As two people, Anya and I, who just drove here today. Yeah, no, that's true. There's
Yes.
a decent amount.
Yes, it was. So it's very interesting to see what developed from what we did.
Other projects that you can talk about with us. We've worked on a number of iconic structures over the years.
Wow.
Take us through your resume of experience here. This runs very deep into the New York State, the network that we use that millions of people in this area use to this day.
Yeah, well, I built, as the engineer in charge of several of these five and a half million projects, and was the EIC of the last project in Riverhead. which was monumental at that time. Of course, it had been publicized pretty heavily in the newspapers about the expressway. In addition to that, I built several different types of bridges and so on. In these 5.5-mile roadway sections, there were a numerous number of bridges included. So the bridges had to be constructed at the time. When it might be interesting to know that I built the expressway at exit 68, which is the crossing to the William Floyd Parkway. And at that time, we built the largest interchange in area with the intention of it being a high-volume interchange, because the thinking at the time was the William Floyd Parkway was going to be the road to the Long Island Sound Bridge to Connecticut. And so that's why it made that interesting job location. In addition to that, I built a drawbridge, Wantagh Parkway by Jones Beach, which is a little different when you get into drawbridges. I built a rather large, significant bridge out in the Hamptons called the Ponquag Bridge. It was a bridge to replace a drawbridge. The drawbridge had gotten ancient, and it was the pathway to the Northeast Fishing Group.
When was that?
You're pushing my memory a little on that one.
So some of these drawbridges, and bridges that you're talking about, they've been around for a while.
Yeah, some of them have been around for a while, and this bridge had been around for a while. And the bridge that I was building was to replace it, not as a drawbridge, but as a single bridge. So it had to be significantly high to allow those fishing craft to get through with their high masts and so on. And that was a lengthy bridge over the water in that area. So that's probably the biggest and longest bridge that I've built.
How has, in your mind, technology changed things since you started until now? I mean, obviously you're still as an EIC now. You're still doing the same type of job, but it has to be a very different type of job as it was, back when you started.
Well, when you say that, the thing that strikes me the most is in those days, we did things with a pencil and paper.
Yeah.
And now today, I'm stuck behind a computer reading emails.
Is that not as much fun for you? Like the compare the two for me.
I'll go with the pencil and paper.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a bit more romantic.
Well, I my opinion, and then it's, I'm not a big computer guy, as you can imagine, but pencil and paper, I think, had to make you think more. Today, the computer tries to fit in all the points that I think should be thought out by an engineer. And I think that could lead to some misgivings. But the fact that you had to sit down with a paper and pencil and draw it up, much like I had to do in college, and think how the thing had to go be done, as opposed to sitting back on a computer and asking it to fill in the blanks, I think is not good. Now, I'm sure there's younger people who disagree with me because, it's so much faster with the computer and so on. But I don't believe that that's the key to success. I think doing it right to get a quality product takes some thought.
It's interesting. You mentioned, the having to learn the new technologies, but also having to learn the different types. I mean, you had a drawbridge, you had the different types of bridges and roads. For you and in the time you've been here, there has to be a continual education process for you to learning all these different things, and whether it's technology that you work with directly or the equipment that's being used out on the road. It seems like you can't just let that happen. You have to be up to speed on all those things. So it seems like there has to be continuing education for you.
Well, that's true. You have to grow with the field and as the technology expands. For example, I am a participant with an engineering magazine that I read every month. and that has a lot of the innovations of technology that I can read on. Other than that, you have to be self-taught, and my job now is pretty much to take that knowledge and give it to people that come to work for me. But I've seen some very innovative things, and like that bridge out in the Hamptons that I built was a little bit different and was a big issue with the federal government at the time on these piles that were used to hold that bridge up. The piles were 165 feet long and 6 feet in diameter, made and fabricated in Virginia and shipped up on barges. And to get a pile 165 foot long through a bay bottom was a little tricky and very interesting. And there had been some controversies with those piles prior to that job. And in fact, not just in this country and in the world, the headline on it was they can't be constructed without cracking them. And so they asked me to, in particular, pay attention to whether this could be done. And sat down with the state and federal people before that job started. They asked me if I would do it, which I did. And it was challenging to drive these piles and get them down without them cracking. And I was successful in developing techniques that we used that didn't crack the piles.
Overall, you have been, with DOT for, a number of different commissioners, a number of different, whether it's federal, whether it's state, a number of different administrations. Have you noticed any changes in the agency as a whole, or any patterns that have happened as a whole, or is it, kind of, obviously there have been small changes like we mentioned, but has, from your perspective, things been kind of similar? Your goals, your roles been similar?
Yeah, there hasn't been anything too dramatic that I could add to that. Titles have changed. Number of peoples in the group have changed. I worked in the first building we were in was a small building in Babylon. We didn't have a thing like air conditioning, for example. But the names of the people and all and what they performed was pretty much similar. The legislature in Albany, I don't believe, has been something that was impacted me in any way. Different governors I've worked for. I started with Governor Rockefeller, and that's what got me in here. And after that, I would say the people that I've worked with and for have all been good, honest, motivated people that do the right thing. And that's one of the reasons I'm still here, is if you can work with the people that you deal with on a daily basis and be comfortable with them and realize that they're on the same page as you are and getting a quality product done reasonably with the contractor, I think that's a good reason to stay with what you're doing.
Well, and I think for anyone who's, been with the same place for as long as you have, there has to be a sense of pride in what you do, and looking at what you've created over the years. Do you have that? I mean, it has to be meaningful, otherwise you wouldn't have stayed as long.
Well, absolutely. There was a time in my career where I kind of refused a promotion up in Buffalo, and I decided to stay on Long Island. As a result of that, I was asked to come in and work in the main office as a supervisor. And I lasted there for 8 years and begged to get out.
Really?
I actually took a demotion to do it. But I'm a field guy, and I wanted to be out in the field running jobs, not being in the office and being an administrator or a paperwork guy with engineering. So I got out, and my boss was good enough to let me go, become the engineer in charge of big contracts on the Sunrise Highway. And probably the best decision I ever made, because if I hadn't made that decision, I probably would have retired 20 years ago. But to hit the point that you brought up, one of the reasons of being a work in the field is not only to be in the field, but when that job is done, and I get in my car for the last time and take a look at it, I say, we got here was a big forest, and now I got 6 lanes of highway here. And look at these cars going. So, yes, and you build a bridge and you look at it and you see the structure and you look at in your mind, you look at all the aspects from the beginning to the end, from the foundation to the superstructure. There is a good reason to be satisfied, and it is one of the things that keeps me going.
I can see how if I had your job, engineer in charge, and I was working on these structures, I would feel like it's part of my legacy. I mean, that's my thoughts on it. Is that kind of how you feel?
Well, I don't think I ever took myself that serious.
But I'm just curious, but to you, it's a job, but it fulfills you. You get a lot of pride out of this.
Well, that's what I was trying to say. I do get pride in it, and when I look at it, I feel satisfied with it, and it does give me a sense of pride to have accomplished something that there's some others that might not have been able to do. So, and the aspects of the problems that develop during the job too. Any contract that you build is filled with something that somebody hasn't thought of, or some new way of doing something that the contractor will think of how to do something. And it's up to me to decide whether I think that'll give me the quality product that we're supposed to get, or no, you can't do it that way.
It has to keep you sharp, though, having to deal with, problems that pop up and important, big problems that have a huge impact. You have to, it has to keep you on your toes.
It certainly does. It's each day is usually some sort of a new problem that develops that you need to make a decision on. And I've been fortunate in being around so long that I can almost anticipate some of them. So my experience helps in giving good answers to these questions. And then when you solve these problems and give these answers, yes or no, especially in the yeses, when a job is over and it worked out and you made the right decision at the right time, that gives me a lot of pride to realize that what I let the contractor do was the right thing to do, build it the right way.
We talk about, whether these structures are your legacy, but you have built and helped build structures that in time you have had to rehab, you have had to rebuild, which I think is fascinating. Talk about that for a second, about, building something and then seeing it through its useful life and then having to get back to it.
Yes, that's incredible. That's an eye-opener. I've had to do that on a couple of occasions. And in fact, one right here in Riverhead some years ago that I built brand new and then had to come back and redo the deck and so on. But we learned something else too. We learned that when I started, we had new inventions then for building to a bridge, for example. And at that time, they would tell you, now this is the most modern product. We can use this product because this will outlast our other bridges. And what are we talking about? Something that might be you're not familiar with, but the joints in a bridge deck. This was a big deal at that time, to get something that won't leak. And so we put them in without thinking, great product. We're going to make these bridges last forever. Then I came back many, many years later and took them out.
It's funny, we joked, our first guest we had was a gentleman named Harry White, who's a bridge engineer in main office, and he was talking about jointless bridges, and
Yes.
he said, when it comes to bridge joints, there are two kinds that leak and kinds that will leak.
Are going to leak.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. It was the same thing. Those bridges that we built in the 60s will never leak. And then in the late 60s and 70s, we found out that they do leak. And as a result of them leaking, they deteriorate some of the substructure below them. So now we've come up with what they call a jointless bridge, which is a whole new concept and design on how to build a bridge.
Josh mentioned Harry White, the engineer who works on bridges. You have got to be an incredible resource for other engineers when you do go back to these same structures like a bridge or a roadway and you need to rebuild them, because you are like their encyclopedia for these projects and how they were built and what might actually be under the ground or what they were made of. Do a lot of engineers come to you and ask you, hey, you worked on this project, what's there, what's inside of it? Do they do that?
I get those questions.
Yeah,
Yes,
I bet.
I get questions from different people at different times. In particular, the gentleman who's in charge of our structures division on Long Island is a friend of mine too, and we talk now and then quite frequently about bridges and what was done when I was there and what we have to do now to make them better or do a better job. And oh yeah, I get picked on that. And like you said, I'm maybe a historian on some of this stuff.
Well, and I was going to say, I mean, it's obviously you're still, working as an EIC, but you do have that institutional knowledge. Is that something that you try to give others who are working with you, your vast excess of knowledge?
Absolutely. That's one of my primary reasons for working too, is not to take what I do know to the grave, but to give it away to others to use. And it's, in a way, it's a little scary in a way, because the people that work for me and the people that I work with and the contractors that we hire to do the work, when I deal with them, I've been working in construction longer than any of these guys have been alive. So if I get into a little bit of a debate, I have a pretty strong argument on my side.
I should say
That's
so.
why I think I might be right. But yes, and I like the idea of taking the young people and training them, and I've done that a lot. There's a lot of people that I've trained over the years who, after I've trained them for a significant amount of time, they go into the office. They want to expand their role with the department. They want to get promoted up to a higher level, and they've done that. And people that have worked for me over the past, later on, I have worked for them because of what they did when the officer got a higher title, which is something I gave up those years I was in there for the 8 years. So it is kind of interesting.
Do you have to take pride in that a little bit too, being able to take someone and help them along and then see them succeed, with your help, but on their own?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That gives me a lot of pride. I think even more so in a way than maybe some of the structures I've built, to see guys that really festered and got into a big position with the department. One friend of mine who I grew up with in Brooklyn and came to talk them into coming with the state after he worked at the city. And he came out and he worked for me, and he decided he was an inside guy, and he went in and he became the head of the regional department. He became the regional director of the department. So, and that was feeling good. And the fellow that's there now, in fact, worked for me briefly. So it is a good feeling.
No plans on retirement for you. You want to keep working.
Yeah, no
right?
plans.
And what, if those silly job interviews where they say, where would you like to be in 5 years? What are you planning? What are you working on right now? And what are your plans for the future as you continue your role as engineer in charge and with DOT?
Well, my plans are pretty much the hope that I can just continue the way I've done before. I got myself on a track a long time ago. And thank God my health and what goes with it has stayed stable. So I'm almost afraid to deviate from that course for fear that change in course might change my body and the way I work, mind and body. So I'm going to stay on that track. I prefer working on bridges more than I do roadways. So I'm hoping to get on some more bridge work again, a little more choosy than I used to be. But I will not anxious to travel, long distances like I used to have to. But pretty much to just stay on the same track, stay sharp, watch the changes, meet the challenges of the changes, and beat them. I remember we were back several years ago. A gentleman that worked with me, we had a change in construction, the way we did it at that time with plans and how to measure. We went from English method to metric units to do all our measuring. And this guy said to me, "Ed, you're never, ever going to do this." And I know why he said it, because I was pretty fixed in how I do things. But I said to him, "You know what? They're not going to beat me on this. That's a challenge I'm going to beat." And I beat it. So I overcame the metric system, and to the point where they gave up, and now we're back to the English. So I beat them down. So, but anyway, yes, I just want to keep doing what I'm going to do. Now, hopefully things work out. I have some issues at home with my wife that's not feeling well, so that plays into it. It might make me want to do something a little different, but for the time being, I think we're both on the same path for me to stay healthy and well, to just keep doing what I'm doing.
Well, we certainly hope that that is the case and remains the case for as long as possible. Ed, cannot thank you enough for taking some time out of your day and sitting down with us to have this chat. This has been fascinating. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
I want to thank you people for giving me the opportunity to be able to say what's on my mind.
I assure you it's our pleasure. So thank you all for listening and tuning in to this edition of the DOT POD. Wherever you find us, you can reach out to us as always, podcast@dot.ny.gov. So from the DOT POD, until next time, we'll be right back here on the DOT POD.